Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. So let me start with the disclosure, which is I was an editor on this project, not the editor. The editor was Ted Anthony, and he should get credit. So credit to Ted. So I have the pleasure of introducing Felipe and Renata, two of our favorite people at the AP. Renata just won a Livingston Award this year, and Adrift has won a series of other awards, including a Webby, and as Patty noted, an OPC Award and a World Press Photo Award. And Felipe was part of the team that won a 2023 Pulitzer Prize for the breaking news photography in Ukraine. He was also a Pulitzer finalist in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2021. So I should mention that they are married. They are obviously a power couple. And the subhead of this session will be how I did it without killing my spouse. So so let's dive straight into it. How did you two get interested in this story? How did you find out about it? Why did you think there was more to it? Can you jump into it?
Yes, thanks, Mary, for the introduction, and Patricia, and thanks for having us to talk about Adrift. So it really started with a phone call from one of my sources who noticed this local news story out of Trinidad and Tobago of a boat that appeared, a strange boat that appeared full of dead bodies. And I cover migration and I'm based in Spain. And so my source as well as a migration expert, we both looked at this boat and we immediately recognized it as the same type of boat that migrants use to migrate from West Africa to Spain, specifically from Mauritania to Spain. So when we saw this boat in Tobago on this local news story, we were both shocked, as were other people who had noticed this news, because it meant that it was likely that migrants had gotten lost in the Atlantic, as we knew that, it happens so often, but we hadn't seen, or at least, there was very little precedent for boats drifting all the way across the Atlantic, even though there were no survivors. And so it just immediately shocked me, and it made me wonder, if this boat drifted across the Atlantic, how many others are lost or sank or are missing? And I think it just rang alarm bells in my head that we need to look into this.
And Renata, you were saying that a source of yours had previously predicted really, that there was going to be more traffic on the more dangerous Atlantic route because of closures on the Mediterranean. So one of the things that I think we really wanted to emphasize in the story, it isn't just a story about this one boat. It's a story of accountability, about the EU's policies and what has led to hundreds of people anonymously dying. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So obviously, the reasons why people migrate and the reasons why certain routes see more traffic is complex, and there's multiple reasons. But one of them was heightened surveillance in the Mediterranean that led people to look into alternatives and smugglers to look into alternatives. And this Atlantic route, we call it the Atlantic route from West Africa to the Canary Islands, which is a European Union territory near the west coast of Africa, reopened, let's say, in 2020, 2021 specifically. And we saw a huge increase in people taking this much more dangerous sea route to Europe. And one of the reasons was because it was getting so much harder to cross the Mediterranean. And yes, as you noticed, as you pointed out, another source of mine had warned that, these heightened surveillance, border closures usually lead to people taking more dangerous
routes.
Just finding another way, basically.
To do. So just because I'm a stickler for detail, how did you know that where the boats came from? Was it their color? Was it their shape? I mean, like how do you tell something like that?
Can let Felipe
Yeah, I
continue.
think once you cover, migration, especially in this region, each country has a very specific type of boat that they use,
Oh,
and they're very unique and colorful in different ways. So it's very easy to identify the ones from Mauritania, for example, as they are white outside and blue inside. The
oh,
ones from Senegal, they're more colorful with, you know, very specific as well. And the ones from Morocco, they also have a different shape. So you kind of know, if you cover migration in Spain, the arrivals in Spain, especially in the Canary Islands, you kind of can identify where they came from because of the boats being used. And specifically the ones from Mauritania, they're very typical and unique to the region. So it was quite easy
that's how
to
you could
find that
tell.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I know very well, this was a project full of challenges. So can you
Yes.
name some of them and tell us how you got past them? I mean, my quick list just in my head is the fact that it spanned several countries and several languages. The fact that the bureaucracy involved here was such that no officials had actually tried to do this. The fact that you did this in the middle of the 2021 pandemic. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the challenges?
Right. I think first the biggest challenges was just a lack of information that there is on this migration route in the Atlantic from the west coast of Africa to the Canary Islands. There is very little information. So there's very little statistics, very little reports, monitoring. So you really have to find people on the ground, local communities that are willing to talk to you. And even then, they might not have that much information. It's very opaque. So that was the first challenge. And also, as you noticed, the boat was found in Tobago. The people came from Mauritania and Mali. They were trying to get to Spain. That just a lot of very long distances, geography, and especially in the beginning when we weren't able to travel there, it was very challenging. And then once we were able to go there, we found other challenges on the field. And I can let Felipe talk about Mauritania, his favorite place to report.
Mauritania, yeah. Well, as Renata just said, it's just difficult just because the amount of countries and really continents involved in one story. And Mauritania specifically is a very challenging place to work. And we really had to investigate a lot in Mauritania, and that was extremely challenging. We had every issue they can imagine to report on the ground there. So that was also.
Yeah, they don't like to talk about migration. Migration is not something you should be asking about. Cameras are, in theory, it's a democracy and it's open to the press. In practice, it's not. And you have police checkpoints everywhere, and people don't want you asking questions.
Yeah, they're really not open to journalists doing any stories that is not in their interest, and migration is one of them. Every official response that we got from them is that they don't have this issue, and there are no.
When we didn't get responses.
If we got, actually,
Okay.
those were after we published, even for other, So basically, they don't acknowledge any
So
issue.
what Felipe is diplomatically avoiding saying is that the two of them, wasn't it in Mauritania that you were thrown into police custody?
No, that was actually in Cape Verde. That was another.
Oh, well, there we go.
That was the second part of the story.
We managed to avoid police in Mauritania. We were,
being
very discreet.
Well, not really avoid, barely, but we managed to escape prison. But
one thing I love about that is that you had very different approaches in terms of what was the best way to get out of prison in Cape Verde. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? We
weren't in prison. We were at the police station, just to be fair. We were asked to follow police officers because we were reporting and trying to talk to survivors. And anyways, long story short, we ended up in a police station. Felipe was very agitated in explaining the rights of
the illegality of what they were doing,
trying to take our cameras away while I was calling the ambassadors of our respective countries to see if they could help us, and we still argue about which tactic worked best. But in the end, we managed to be released and continue our reporting.
Yeah, but that was, as Renata said, that was in the
That was in Cape Verde.
in the second part of Adrift
Yeah,
and
36
36 days.
Yeah.
And but during Adrift in Mauritania, we had challenges with just everything you can imagine. Access, the fixers, the translators, the drivers were afraid when they realized we were reporting on migration. They didn't really want to work with us. So it was really difficult to work. And also culturally, at the beginning, we had issues with access in the villages. Once they figured out what we were doing and the story came out, it was the opposite. They wanted more, but you know, it was really challenging in the beginning to really convince that we were just trying to
to explain what
Yeah.
we were doing, what we were trying to find out, and when people understood that actually, you know, we want to find out who the victims are in this tragedy and find their families, most people were helpful, let's say.